Hi, good morning. Today I'm going to replace the gasket for the oil cooler and the oil filter. Need to do some preparatory work first. The reason is because of some leakage at the bottom right there. I've also disconnected the negative terminal just in case I need to remove the manifold intake and which requires a removal of the computer system. Here I've stuffed some plastic bags to protect the alternator and also some tissue paper in there to absorb any excess oil or coolant coming out from the area. Next I'm going to remove this part of the intake before I go on to the DME. This tool has become handy in removing the clips for the MF. I've disconnected this crossbar to make it easier to access the removal of the intake. I've loosened this point, disconnected 3 points here. Okay, I'm all set. I'm now going to disconnect remove the oil cover and remove the filter, and also attempt to drain out the coolant into a separate bottle so that the level of the coolant here will drop below that level, which then does not require me to do a big cleanup in the cooler housing and the filter housing. I'm using this tool to loosen the oil filter housing. I'll loosen it a little bit too so that the residual oil can seep back into the main engine. That's the oil filter housing loosened, and next to the coolant, this is what I'm going to use to siphon the coolant out. That's the first siphon. That's a full siphon. The reason I'm doing this is because I just replaced the coolant fluid less than a month ago. This was siphoning with the hose attached to go to the bottom of the container. Check on my oil level. Generally come out clean. Most of the oil has drained back into the engine, just a bit more to be siphoned out. See the siphoning effect working there? It's almost empty now, left a bit in there to prevent any air from going into the main pipes. And this is how much I had siphoned off. Actually it's about a liter. There was a half a liter left in there. And I'll put the cover back to prevent anything from dropping in there. Okay, now I got to remove the car's computer because there's a pexy little screw or nut somewhere at the bottom, right there. Yeah. Tried using this angle thing, it doesn't want to go in, so I have no choice but to remove the thing to get it nut. Removing this, of course, is pretty straightforward, but make sure your battery connections are off to avoid damaging the computer systems. careful, some of it are brittle, so go easy. This you gotta slide out. Got to do this with the camera off. Okay, that's it. All of them have been, the connectors have been removed. This was a bit difficult because this one's cable was running right over here. Okay, about to unscrew the computer from the main engine body. Okay, the computer is ready for removal. You got to handle this with care. It's the brains of your car. Damage this and you're going to end up doing a brain replacement. And that's the body, and you got to access some screws in there to loosen the manifold so you can get to the screw at the bottom, sorry, at the bolt at the bottom there. Before I work on the manifold, I'm going to siphon off this excess oil here because once we start loosening that, more oil coming out, and we got to remove this residual oil first. After I've done this, siphoning this oil, I'll start removing this without disconnecting the hoses, because by then the water level should have dropped to that level out there. That may increase slightly if the vacuum is released from here and the water level flows back in there. I'm using another siphon system separate from the coolant to avoid mixing oil and the coolant. I'm removing the oil cooler bolts now. I'll remove this side. The one I removed from the bottom was a bit oily and dirty. I've cleaned it, already cleaned it a bit, so it's leaking in there. You can see it on my fingers too. This is a moment of truth, and that's your oil pouring down, hopefully caught by that pieces of paper there and tissue. So got to get to work to clean it up. And indeed, with the vacuum release, the water level has come up, so the water has drained back, so I don't have to remove the hoses or lose any coolant in the process. This is the other side of the oil cooler. Needs some cleaning. And that's it, dirty in there. Probably have that removed wholly to clean. My extension and the bolt remover is unable to get in there, so I got to remove this top base plate. The screws tend to be self-tapping screws, so got to be careful with them. They're separate, different from the others. Okay, the base plate is about to come off. Seems to be some gaskets and everything there too, so got to be careful with those. Checking inside my intakes, nice and clean except for some oil. Must be the recirculating oil from the engine. Be careful not to allow anything to drop in there. I have loosened the intake manifold bolts and ready to move back the intake manifold so I can get at the bolt end there. To avoid any accidents, I'm putting this cover back from anything dropping into the intake manifold. Bolt is extension is now fitted onto the bolt, ready to be removed. Here I'm using the ratchet wrench to remove the bottom bolt, loosening it actually. The lower bolt is just about to come off. This is what it looks like on the other side. And the other surface. Need to clean this all up. The mess is there. Thankfully it wasn't much. And to keep it nice and clean. Good. Using this tool to remove this. I had to tuck it in initially. It's now nice and loose. You only need to just pull it out by hand. Almost complete. Both of the gaskets have come off cleanly. I'm using this green wool to clean all the surfaces to avoid scratching them. Here's our oil filter housing, clean and ready to receive the new gasket. New gasket is in place, ready to go and mate with the engine body. Oil filter housing is been mounted and tightened to torque 18 Newton meters plus 20 degrees. The bottom was hand tightened. New gasket for the oil cooler housing also inserted, ready to mate with the cooler. This is the cooler housing fitted back and torqued down to 22 Newton meters. All the three, including the one at the bottom here. Remove all the covers. Alternator looking nice and clean. Now to work on the manifold gaskets and replace the bolts. First of the new gaskets fitted. It's cylinder number 2, I think. Got a fit for the others. That's all of our gaskets fitted, ready to mount the manifold intake to the main engine body. This manifold now seated onto the engine body with new gaskets. Now to tighten all the, or put the bolts back and tighten all of them. 1, 2, 5 of them. Gaskets for the heat sink replaced. The heat sink just flops into place. I'll need to put 8 bolts in there. The heat sink is back on with the 8 bolts. And now for the brains of the car. The car's computer is back on. Now to connect all the cables. All cables connected. Now to put back the intake and touch up all the other things and complete the job. Okay. Intake is back. Crossbar is back and tighten. Computer is back. Manifold is back, manifold. All those are tightened. MEF is back. Everything on. Now to refill the coolant level, which has dropped a bit, and to do the bleeding. Coolant has been topped up. Now I'm going to start the bleeding procedure. Ignition on. Press accelerator for 10 seconds. Yep, that should do it. Okay, all complete. Bleeding done. coolant up to its normal level. All looks okay for now. Going for a short drive. Return all hoses back to normal, including the vacuum hoses.